And in today's episode, I got a chance this morning to drive into Seattle and meet with Washington Attorney General Nick Brown. He was holding a press conference today to announce a new lawsuit against Safeway, Albertsons, Hagen's, all the same ownership group, off over their buy one, get one free. Apparently, he says there's been some price fixing here and some violations of consumer protection. And so he's filed this lawsuit. That's not why I went. That ends up being a benefit for one of my colleagues, Randy Diamond, our Seattle reporter, who's going to be writing up this lawsuit because this is actually a significant story. But the whole reason I wanted to drive into Seattle and see AG Nick Brown was because it provided the first opportunity since our breaking story 1 week ago today, and my colleague TJ Martinell, after obtaining the records from the office of AG Brown into how they collaborated with the sponsors of the income tax bill, how to craft the bill to maybe get around the state constitution, and also to avoid the public weighing in, attaching a referendum clause to that bill. So I did get a couple of questions into A.G. Brown this morning. He was a bit dismissive, but we're going to share that response with you in today's episode of Washington in Focus. So let's dive in. This Monday, today, started with a press conference in Seattle at the Seattle office of Attorney General Nick Brown, to announce that he is suing Albertsons, Safeway, and Hagen's, all under the same parent ownership group, over their buy one, get one free deals. I happen to shop at my nearby Safeway, do most of my grocery shopping outside of Costco there, and I take advantage of the buy one, get one free. Or in my case, since we're chipaholics in our house, we'll like buy 2 bags of chips and get 3 free. He's suing him over that, saying it's deceptive advertising. But that's not why I went to the press conference. My colleague, Randy Diamond, is going to be writing about this fascinating lawsuit. But I went to specifically ask him about the documents obtained by the Center Square and my colleague TJ Martinell. And we wrote about this last week and through the week, had a series of exclusive articles with reaction to the documents, which basically showed collusion, coordination, whatever you want to call it, between the AG's office and the prime sponsor of Senate Bill 6346, the income tax bill. And this basically showed that they went back and forth quite a few times. We had 988 pages of unredacted documents showing these emails saying, how should we craft this? You might want to add an emergency clause or a referendum proof clause to this bill. How should we word this to basically force this to the state Supreme Court? And that's where things are going at this point. So that was my motivation for attending the press conference. And I did get an opportunity to press AG Brown about the documents that we obtained.
Here for just a second, I asked you with the documents that the Center Square obtained. Do you think it's appropriate for your office to be giving lawmakers advice on how to break the state constitution?
Well, I would disagree with your framing of it, but it is very common for AG's offices to advise their clients on the law, the status of cases, analyzing prior Supreme Court decisions. It is something that we do on a regular basis. It is something that all of my predecessors have done. So yes, I think it's pretty common and appropriate.
A discussion of how to bypass the voters from your office, your attorneys in your office, and all saying this is what you need to do to attach this referendum to bypass the voters. Is that appropriate?
That's just wrong. If you look at the email communications, my Solicitor General and people in the office were talking about how this, because it's raising revenue, couldn't go to referendum. So we weren't trying to bypass the voters. We weren't advising the legislature how to do that. We were explaining what the state of the law is. So the framing of the question and the reporting of that is just incorrect.
So it was not a huge surprise to hear his basically dismissal of my questions today, and basically saying that it's not inappropriate or at all out of precedent for his office to weigh in on litigation. What I've heard from others that have spoken to us here at the Center Square over the last week and a half since we obtained these documents is the part that's unusual is to have someone in the AG's office going out of their way to say, you might want to add this referendum clause, or here's where I think this is going before the state Supreme Court. Here's how you could push the issue. That's what is unusual in this case. And of course, of interest, I know, to a lot of folks who watch our coverage. So we're going to be staying on top of that. Now, as the Washington State Supreme Court prepares to weigh in this week on the constitutionality of a portion of the newly signed income tax on high earners, another high net worth Washingtonian is making plans to potentially relocate his business and his home. We're talking about Principal and Chief Investment Officer at Bulwark Capital Management, Zach Abraham, who, in an interview with the Center Square today, told me this is the final blow for him. Of course, they've got B&O and other high taxes on business. He said they paid between $300,000 and $350,000 in taxes just for his little business last year to the state of Washington. And now we have potentially the millionaire's tax, if it's not overturned or repealed by voters, going to impact his business. And he says that'll be the final blow for him. That'll be the final blow. This is, again, I'll remind you, a 9.9% tax at this point on income in excess of $1 million or combined household income in excess of $1 million for 2028 earnings, taxes that would have to be paid for the first time in 2029 in the state of Washington. But reminder, and if you watch our podcast, you know that a lot of folks in the small business community have been kind of ringing the bell going, this isn't just going to be millionaires. I'm not a millionaire. I own a business that operates as a pass-through entity, and this is going to hurt me as well and potentially put me out of business. So I want to play part of my interview today with Zach Abraham of Bulwark Capital.
The income tax was really a dividing line for me on a bunch of different levels. First of all, as a business owner, where my entire life, my largest investments, my business, my employees' lives are all in the state. And when you start, and this is something that I know for a fact, talking to enough people, this is one of the deleterious aspects of having lawyers run large organizations, is that they're smart enough and accomplished enough for other people to think they're smart, yet virtually none of them have had any experience creating, building, or running anything. And so there's this, like, for instance, something they don't understand is not only are a lot more people going to leave than they think, they're not going to be able to get any outside investing in Washington-based companies. And the reason why is not vindictive. It's the same reason my buddy that is, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to put him on blast, but he was senior partner at one of the largest VC funds in Seattle, and they've left. And he and I were having a conversation. He goes, Zach, not only can we not stay here, we can't fund any companies that are incorporated here. And the reason why is you just broke the contract. What are you going to break next? I can't trust you. You know what I mean? And when you break the laws, you don't understand because you're not business people and you're business and financially illiterate. It's not that we want to leave to stick it in your eye. It's that we can't invest here, right? You've tied our hands. And so not only are you going to get a giant outflow of capital, you will have no new businesses formed here. They can keep lying to themselves and telling themselves Starbucks is staying. They're gone. They're gone. And if you go look at the deal that Tennessee gave them, once again, they have a fiduciary responsibility to move their company. They can't justify to shareholders why they'd stay here.
One of the big issues for Zach Abraham in our interview today, he told me, was the fact that lawmakers really have sidestepped the voters in all of this, attaching that referendum clause, making it necessity for the state budget, which precludes a referendum unless Brian Haywood and Let's Go Washington are successful at the state Supreme Court this week, precludes a referendum challenge to this from voters. He said basically this is a contract breach as far as he is concerned. And he said, when you break the law, you don't understand, because you're not business people, these are his words, that, you break the law, that's it. That state constitution is our contract, and now you've broken that. And he is convinced that this is going to deter future investment in the state of Washington. And he said not only will there be a giant outflow of capital, but no new business forming here. And for him, he says this is very much a moral issue as well.
Not only am I not going to let you illegally trample over my rights and violate the contract that we both have adhered to, but I'm not going to then watch you do that and take those ill-gotten gains and support things that hurt the people that I love, right? I'm not going to watch you give kids life-altering surgeries without parental consent with my tax dollars. Not doing it. And it's just reached a point, right, where I've probably cut them too much deference because this is my home and it's where I was raised. But, I answer to not just my family, but I answer to God. And I'm looking at this going, I can't sit here and do this. I can't. You've tied my hands. This is a bridge too far. You do this. You think it's a threat. It's not a threat. And that's the funny thing that they don't get because they're lawyers, because they've never accomplished anything, because they've never built anything. And I'm not denigrating lawyers. I'm just saying that we have a saying in the investment business: when the CPAs and the lawyers start running the company, sell. Right? Just because that's not what they do. Right? That's not what they do. Everything is a legal negotiation. So when you take that application to something like running a state, like, shocker, the state's a mess.
Now, on Thursday, Let's Go Washington's challenge to the Secretary of State refusing to process a referendum to the income tax. That is going before the state Supreme Court. We're going to be there. We'll bring you exclusive coverage. So Brian Haywood of Let's Go Washington shared with me why he thinks this is such a critical fight for him, not just, as somebody who's going to be subjected to the millionaire's tax in Washington, but more than that, the principle of what state lawmakers did in crafting the income tax bill.
And I found that this last session, when they were taking questions and they were asked about, well, aren't you concerned about the constitutionality of what you're proposing? And their response was, well, that's for the courts to decide. And I have never heard such a shameful shirking of responsibility. These are elected officials who are sworn to uphold the Constitution. And you don't make laws by going, hey, we're just going to make up rules as we go, and then we'll let the courts decide whether it's legal or not. I think their first priority should be making laws that are within the bounds of the Constitution. That should be job number one, is to, whatever you do, it should be within the bounds of the Constitution. And if you happen to overstep and the court checks you on it, that's a check and a balance. But you shouldn't start out with saying, Calvin ball, we're going to make up whatever rules we want anytime we want. And this is, to me, this is a really important safeguard that needs to be in the Constitution. Is in the Constitution. It needs to be upheld.
So again, a reminder, Haywood's case in Let's Go Washington and their appeal to the state Supreme Court is being heard in an expedited case before the full state Supreme Court on Thursday, and we will be there. Now, a Washington state farming advocacy group called Save Family Farming has been bringing to light a Yakima-based activist organization called We Are Ella. They received $500,000 in Climate Commitment Act funds and then used some of that funding for political attacks on farms across Washington state. So they contend that the Save Family Farming Group contends that, We Are Ella is getting the money that you're spending at the gas pump. You recall the CCA spiked our gas prices more than 50 cents for every gallon is going to that funding. And then again, some of it is doled out to these activist organizations. In this case, a group that is, making a lot of claims about farming and the egg community in central and eastern Washington that Save Family Farming contends are simply untrue, absolutely false. And so I had a conversation with Save Family Farming's executive director, Ben Tyndall.
Or late last year, we saw some videos that they were producing coming out on their social media page that really presented a disparaging or false story about dairies in particular, jumping to some conclusions without really any science provided or citing any sources directly in their videos, putting the blame on agriculture. When there are a vast array, if anyone has looked at air quality, water quality, there are a lot of reasons or factors that play into this. And it is, from our perspective, very disingenuous to put all the blame on one sector, really, that shouldn't or is undeserving. As they were presenting this manipulative or false message, they would then put the Department of Health logo at the end of their video, which caused us to really question, is this, from our perspective, this propaganda something that really is being sponsored by the Department of Health? About a couple weeks ago, we finally received a response from the Department of Health, in essence, saying they have reviewed the videos in question. They reached out to We Are AYA. They have requested that those videos be removed or adjusted to remove the logo, and that they are assuring us that they did not sponsor this, while at the same time acknowledging, yes, We Are AYA did receive a grant for nearly $500,000 to craft videos, and in their words, community storytelling around issues of environmental justice. What kind of enforcement do they have around ensuring that these grant dollars are being utilized the way that they're intended, and that their official logo is not being misused to manipulate or misrepresent? And so they shared with us that we've reached out to We Are AYA. We've confirmed that this material has been removed, and yet you can still go on their site, the We Are AYA Facebook page, their social media. The videos are still up.
So Save Family Farming saw this stuff months ago and said, hey, wait a minute, I see the Department of Health's logo stamped all over some of this material that's blasting, family farmers and the egg community in Washington. CCA money being used to attack farmers in the state of Washington. They went to Attorney General, I started to say Bob Ferguson, Attorney General Nick Brown's office with some of their concerns. And they also alerted the Department of Health and said, hey, wait a minute, what's going on? Wasn't until about 2 weeks ago, and this was 6 months ago when they brought the concerns to light. 2 weeks ago, Tyndall says they finally received a response, basically with the Department of Health saying, yes, we gave this money to We Are Ella. Yes, we are aware that some of that was going to be used for what they call community storytelling around issues of environmental justice. At the time, the Department of Health told Save Family Farming, and I've seen the emails, we've told We Are Ella to get the Department of Health logo off of any of their material, go back and remove those videos, change any promotional material that you have that says this is basically, got the sign of approval from the Department of Health. And Save Family Farming was told that that had happened, but it hasn't. I saw at least 2 posts today where the Department of Health logo remains on some of that material. And Tyndall says his overarching concern from Save Family Farming is that state lawmakers, including those who back the CCA and decided how funding could be used, really don't understand the struggles for Washington's farming community.
This breakdown between our legislators and those who are making the policy not understanding or having a real grasp on how agriculture operates and the seasonality components of it really has created a detrimental overtime system that is hurting farms that really aren't seeing help there. Another is this CCA component, where farms were guaranteed at the beginning that they would be exempt from that fuel tax. And as we've seen over the past several years, that has turned into a fiasco, and so many farmers are paying now very astronomical prices on fuel for farm use when they should be exempt. And the state is doing a horrible job of helping and ensuring that farmers are receiving this exemption that by law they are required to, but the state has just kind of shrugged their shoulders and said, well, we don't know how to do it, so sorry. And that should never have been acceptable, and that has really been detrimental to farms.
Now, I did reach out to We Are Ella and the Department of Health, got no response from We Are Ella. The Department of Health responded with an email to say the timeline was too short and they would not be able to meet our timeline ahead of publication for our article or for today's episode of Washington in Focus. If and when they do provide comment, the story will be updated and we'll bring you that information. Then there's Representative Tom Dent, Moses Lake. He's a rancher about 7 miles outside of Moses Lake. He's got a ranch where he raises bison and grows hay. He's been speaking out about some of these issues for quite some time and told me he was not at all surprised to find out that some CCA funding is going to an activist organization that is using some of that material to rail against farmers and the egg community in Washington.
The state of Washington just seems to have this war on agriculture, and they just want to attack us for everything we do because, everything is bad, right? Fertilizer is bad. Any pesticides we use are bad. This growing crops destroys the soil. We can't have a dairy because we're going to get in the groundwater. So we have all this nitrogen, quote, going into the groundwater. But by the same token, drive by on a rainy day, drive by somebody's corral where they got horses or cows and tell me how much water's out there. Well, all that mud and water's in there because I have a pond over here. I sealed it with manure, so I can keep the water in it. And it works good. I have water in there all winter long. Okay. So, they just have this war on agriculture, and it doesn't surprise me that somebody hasn't filtered some way to get money, to continue this war. And cows are bad up in the mountains. They can't go in the streams. They got to fence everything off. Because they might put some excretions into the stream, although it's okay if deer and elk and everybody else does, but cows can't, right? So because they're part of agriculture, and I'm telling, it's just so frustrating that we can't understand where our food comes from, right? It's like you like eating, but I guess you're going to grow it in a test tube. I don't know. We have overregulated them. We make them do things that other states don't have to do. We have all this agriculture overtime in place now. Our labor costs are like 400% higher than the rest of the country. How are we going to make any money? And when you tell the rancher he's got to fence off this creek, well, it doesn't seem like much, except when you start adding up the miles of fence, it gets to be quite a lot, right? So you have to buy the materials, buy the labor, put it in. All that stuff happens, and it all takes money, and it doesn't stop. And right now, in 2026, started in 2024, when our agriculture really hit the bottom. This is as bad as agriculture has been in 100 years, but they don't care.
Representative Dent has also spent quite a bit of time working on mental health issues for those in the farming community, and especially here in Washington state. The egg community and farmers in general nationwide have some of the highest suicide rates and have for many, many years among many industries. The financial struggles are a big part of that. And Representative Dent says that, the burdens that have been placed on farmers and egg producers with the additional regulations, labor costs that are required to be exponentially higher than in many other states. He believes that is in large part contributing to the mental health decline. And I think we covered this in a recent episode of Washington in Focus, that we're losing 3 to 4 farms in the state of Washington every single day at this point. And again, the conclusion here from Representative Dent and the Save Family Farming folks are that, the state needs to pay more attention to the plight of our farmers. They're the ones putting food in our local grocery stores, and they're not making very much money doing it at this rate. So again, if We Are Ella sends another response, or the Department of Health does, we will bring you that update. So that is it for today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily for this Wednesday, April the 29th of 2026. As always, thank you for watching. Tune in again tomorrow.